Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a smorgasbord of videos concerning a congressional hearing of Pete Hegseth, the incredibly underqualified Secretary of Defense in charge of 3 million people and $1 trillion of budget. The man, I think, is one of these unserious appointments for the Trump administration, whereby his the main entries to his CV were worked for Fox News and was incredibly loyal to Donald Trump. So that's what qualifies him for the job, but actually he's not doing, I would argue, a very good job. He's been fairly incompetent, and just think of Signalgate, right? And that happened twice, and he was at the heart of that, indeed giving sensitive intelligence over to his wife, to his personal lawyer, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I don't think this man is equipped to do the job he is doing. And this is at a time where you need someone really bloody competent in charge. There's all sorts of stuff going on all around the world. Anyway, there's this congressional hearing, and I don't know the value of these because there is the element of the backfire effect that could well be brought into play here, such that when you challenge someone, especially if you give them the full frontal and the full frontal assault, they're more likely to entrench in their original position and fight even harder for their own, I don't know, dignity and defend their own position kind of quasi-rationally, rather than try and show someone where they've gone wrong and get them to change their position, change their views, change their rhetoric, change whatever. You know, I always talk about nudging people in the right direction, rather than, it's very rare that you do this against someone and they go, oh yeah, good point, change their position completely and do a 180 shift and go the other direction. That's unlikely, and it will, I think, it potentially polarizes and potentially just puts Hegseth even more firmly in his camp, where he's just like, well, screw Democrats, I hate Democrats, they just give me a hard time. But their job is to give him a hard time. You know, he is accountable to an incredible amount of money and to the people of the United States, and he's accountable to Congress. And so they are doing the right thing, but you wonder, you know, who wins out of this. Now, I'm going to show you a number of different Congress people giving Pete Hegseth one hell of a time over a number of different topics. And I have to say, I agree with all of these Congress people. That's probably no surprise to you, as I will skew Democrat. Hegseth, though, I mean, goodness me, he is not the man for the job. Anyway, we're going to start with Slotkin. Now, Slotkin is a former intelligence. In fact, let me have a look. Yes, I was going to say Michigan. So, yeah, Alyssa Slotkin is the representative for Michigan, and she was a CIA analyst and Department of Defense official. And actually, you got Tammy Duckworth, who is a veteran herself. So, a number of these people who are giving Pete Hegseth a rough time are people from within the defense domain. Okay, let's start with Alyssa Slotkin here.
They can arrest all day long. That's the job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing. Authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man. List it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
Yes or no answer.
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are
okay, so say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
Do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job,
Okay.
deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous
So
administration.
they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As
is
we've
that right?
stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily
Okay.
detain and
Have
hand
you-
over to ICE. But
have
there's
you
no
given-
arresting going
have
on.
you-
And you know this better
Have
than
you
you're trying to
authorized
play
the
political
U.S.
games.
military
There's
to
no
use
arresting
cyber
of U.S.
tools
personnel.
of the U.S. military against members of the protest? Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given?
And so you'll find a trend that goes on here, which is, she says, "Great, I love that answer. Like, I've given you a yes or no. You've answered me no. No way that I know of. Brilliant. Okay, let's have more of that." But the problem is, he just doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to answer yes or no. But then there's just a lot of opportunity here of Democrats to just lay into Pete Hegseth for where they see him as incompetent.
Colleague from
This is Tammy Duckworth, who is a veteran herself.
Oklahoma, I believe the Secretary of Defense has just responded last week and admitted that the $1 billion mission that he led against the Houthis, who do not have a navy, has not restored the transit of U.S. flag commercial vessels through the Red Sea, and in fact has resulted in the loss of 2 F-18 Hornets to the tune of $60 million apiece, as well as, I believe the last count was 7 Reaper drones to the tune of another $200 million. You are blowing through money like my fellow cadets and I did in our first Liberty after basic camp. Luckily, I didn't end up with a questionable tattoo.
That is such a burn, right? So the idea here is that he's got these very dubious Christian nationalist tattoos, and she says you're blowing through money, like I did with my cadets at blah blah blah, but except I didn't end up with a questionable tattoo. Ouch! Just serious ouch.
Your failures, Mr. Secretary, since you've taken office has been staggering. You sent classified operational information over Signal to chest thump in front of your wife, who, by the way, has no security clearance, risking service member lives in the process. You blew the $1 billion fight against the Houthis, whom, again, as my colleague says, has no navy, and yet you lost all of those aircraft. You've created such a hostile command environment that no one wants to serve as your chief of staff or work with you in other senior DoD leadership roles. But what we should all be talking about, more than all of this, is that you have an unjustified, un-American misuse of the military in American cities, pulling resources and attention away from core missions to the detriment of the country, the warfighters, and yes, the war fighting that you claim to love. I don't know if this is because you are too inexperienced and incompetent to understand the real threats facing our country, or if it's because you are just an unqualified yes man who can't tell the president how to keep Americans safe. You are focusing on renaming bases for Confederate generals. You said just now to Senator King that to a man and to a woman, we would rather be associated with the old Confederate names. Well, I am one of those women. I served at Fort Rucker, Alabama, a base that was named for a traitor who took arms against the United States of America, led troops who killed Americans. It was renamed for Mike Novosel, a Medal of Honor recipient, who in his citation for the Medal of Honor includes that he saved 29 American lives, to include hovering backwards in a helicopter towards an enemy bunker where a wounded American was laying and saved that person, including after being taken fire himself. I know a little something about what it takes to fly a helicopter when you've been hit by enemy fire. That was heroic. I'd rather be associated with Mike Novosel than a failed Confederate traitor. I don't know.
What a rant. What a rant. And really on point. So this whole fight, this culture wars fight about, well, you've got these bases that are named after Confederate generals. Well, the Confederacy was fighting against the Union and lost, and they were fighting for slavery. And so this is divisive, especially if you're trying to attract people of colour into the armed forces. Then it's surely obviously divisive. To me, it's obviously divisive to have bases named after Confederate generals. This is a form of glorification. You are glorifying these people in history. Now, to have those base names change, I think is just pretty obvious, right? It's just like, yeah, just do it. Like, 10, 15 years' time, that'll be lost in history, right? And you can move on. But now Trump's come in, they're changing them all back. And as she said, you've just now supplanted a true war hero that we can all agree did an amazing stuff, gets a Medal of Honor, and now you've taken his name off and brought back a Confederate general. Like, what is going on?
No, whether you are inexperienced or too incompetent, but I wonder when you will actually focus on our nation's warfighting mission. We know that California is just a deliberate, systematic, political, and dangerous campaign led by you. We should not be using our military to play cops against Americans. General Kane, as chairman.
So that was just a stop using, at the end there, stop using the military as a form of a police force, really. And this is a recurring theme that goes on throughout the questions. We've already seen that come up now twice.
Instead of patrolling American neighborhoods and standing in front of federal buildings, they should be rehearsing call for fire missions. We have local police who can stand in front of those federal buildings. And the list of distractions goes on. You are encouraging the DoD workforce to go work for DHS in increasing numbers. You're pulling the military away from facing foreign enemies who literally say things like death to America. And you're putting troops with weapons aimed at Americans. Mr. Secretary, let the military get back to its real job. Stop forcing them to do DHSs. And if you want to be DHS Secretary, maybe you can apply for that job when you're fired from this one due to your incompetence.
The senator's time has expired.
You can tell how angry she is. I mean, this is a real personal attack as well. Well, it's not she genuinely believes he's incompetent. I think he's incompetent. Many people do. But when you get fired from this job, you can apply to be the secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, and then you can do with the police what you like, right? But at the moment, you're in charge of, as you call them, war fighters. They need to be used for, war fighting, get them ready for competent activities in the correct domain. So then we're going over to Hirono here. Senator Hirono says the following.
Let's face it, it is not normal to call up our troops in this way, and there is active litigation against this deployment. Will you follow a court's order regarding whether or not this deployment is legal? If the court says this deployment of troops into our cities is not legal, would you follow that court's order?
It's pending in the courts, Senator.
Again, yes or no? Yes or no?
Well, when the court decides, would you follow the court's order, decision?
I don't believe district courts should be determining national security policy.
So you will not be following that?
When it goes to the Supreme Court, we'll see.
Court?
If it goes, so then he says, well, they shouldn't be making that decision. Okay, that's not a yes or no. So if you think they should be not making that decision, that level of courts, then the answer is no. I want you to say yes or no, but he says they shouldn't be making that decision. And then he says, well, if it goes to the Supreme Court, so that is the highest court in the land, okay, so yes or no, will you follow that decision? And he himself offers up that we'll see. We'll see.
And unless the president decides to appeal, there you have it. So I take it that you don't consider district court decisions to be legitimate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not even sure he sees the Supreme Court as legitimate by that answer. So incredible. Here we have, is it Senator Rosen?
So would you also agree then that anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have no place in our government? Or
this, by the way, this is arguably this part here my favorite interaction, because I talked about who she's going to mention in a second as one of the spokespeople for the Pentagon as being an insanely inappropriate selection, and that she has really disreputable views, anti-Ukraine views, anti-Semitic views. I mean, she's just a bad choice. And actually, this is laid out really well. And again, notice yes or no, and he evades answering a closed question again.
So would you also agree then that anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have no place in our government or military? Yes or no?
They should not.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is like, that's an easy one to answer, right? Of course they should not. If I say yes, then I'm in total trouble. But she's laying the trap out here, and he realizes what's going on, and then he can't answer the yes or no going forward.
So would you also agree that anyone who has posted, and I'm going to quote, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories lifted right out of a neo-Nazi playbook, end quote, shouldn't be anywhere near a position of power? Yes or no?
Since I don't believe the characterization of many officials in the news media, I would need to see precisely what's being characterized.
But generally, would you not say that if
Generally
we
speaking,
thought something
sure.
was coming out of a neo-Nazi playbook, it doesn't have any...
So he tried to extricate himself from that, and then she's like, okay, well, let's go generally. And again, he has to answer no, because otherwise he says it's fine to have complete anti-Semites in positions of power. But then the noose tightens even further.
Place in our Department of Defense. Now, Secretary Hegseth, the quote that I just read you was referencing Ms. Kingsley Wilson, the DOD press secretary. It's a direct quote from her, who my Republican colleagues on this committee have also expressed alarm over due to her comments. In fact, one colleague said, and I'm going to quote again, obviously I don't agree with her comments. I trust the Pentagon will address this, end quote. However, in the months since, not only have you not addressed these anti-Semitic comments, you have promoted Ms. Wilson. This seems to be at odds, honestly, with President Trump's commitment, very public commitment to combat anti-Semitism, which you just said you two agreed with. So, Secretary Hegseth, given the rise in anti-Semitic violence, hate crimes in our nation, and to show that the Trump administration, your administration, does have a zero-tolerance policy for anti-Semitism, will you dismiss Ms. Kingsley from her role as a U.S. military spokesperson today, yes or no?
Again, that's why I referenced the context and characterization.
Well, we'll send you the quote,
I've worked
sir.
directly with her. She does a fantastic job, and there's any suggestion that I or her
So
or others are party to anti-Semitism is a mischaracterization attempting to win political points.
So the question is it a mischaracterization? And the simple answer is no, it's not. Oops, I'll find it for you here. So here we have NPR reporting a Pentagon press secretary has a history of pushing anti-Semitic extremist theories, and then details them there. In fact, she's been called out by the Times of Israel and Israeli media sources as well. New Pentagon spokesperson promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theory as it happened. And then we have, just to throw another one in, we have, sorry, that's the wrong one. Yeah, Stars and Stripes reporting that new Pentagon press secretary, outspoken critic of Ukraine aid, State Department and immigration. So yeah, she's not a fan of Ukraine and has demonstrably made anti-Semitic remarks in the past.
And I'm going to say
Senator,
that
you're
your
attempting
lack
to
of
win
an
political
answer
points on the backs of
confirms what we've
mischaracterizing the
known all
statements of a
along.
member
The Trump
of my
administration
department,
is not serious.
and I'm not going to stand for that.
You are not a serious person. You are not serious about rooting out, fighting anti-Semitism within the ranks of our DOD. It's despicable. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm going to move on to General Hawk.
So then moves on to talk to another official, but just yeah, again, I think I reported at the time that's a truly problematic appointment there. So then we are going back to Rosen here.
On an inexplicable dismissal of General Hawk. He serves both director of the National Security Agency, commander.
This is to do with the purging of people who were competent at the top of the leadership in the DOD, and then replacing them with kind of yes men and loyalists and ideologues.
Of U.S. Cybercom, it's deeply concerning, raises significant questions about the decision-making process, its potential consequences. Public reports indicate that the removal of General Hawk, who has served his country proudly, has been influenced by social media influencer, a personality on social media, Laura Loomer.
This is the idea that Laura Loomer has been a big part of the purges. So the national security advisors who were gone. In fact, there are some claiming that she's fairly important because she's she's a really far-right influencer conspiracy theorist, but also is from a Jewish background. So she's got this really interesting mix there. But she's thought to be even influencing foreign policy decision-making regarding the US and its position on Israel and Iran. So all sorts going on. But Laura Loomer was at the heart of these purges that were taking place, to which Ms. Rosen here is commenting.
Spreads conspiracy theories. She's been denounced even by Republicans. And the idea is that any leaders within our agencies responsible for our nation's security, somebody would be dismissed based on the advice of a social media influencer is alarming, to say the least. It's surely not how we should be running our military. So were you consulted regarding General Hawk's dismissal, yes or no?
Well, Senator, I would not advise believing everything you read in the media.
Were you?
And I'm consulted on.
And he does this an awful lot. He did this in the questioning the other day, which I might actually dig out because it's worth playing again, where there were 3 levels of incompetence that were leveled at him, and he again did exactly this kind of answering.
Every single decision.
Okay,
I'm the
so that's
decision maker
alarming.
for the
It's your
department, and we all
department,
serve
Mr.
at the pleasure of the president,
Okay.
and
So
we have
what
the
was your-
prerogative to
what
make
was
those
your
decisions
What
for
was
the
your
best for the
recommendation?
country,
Did you
and we did
personally
that.
approve Mr. Hawk's dismissal, yes or no?
Anyone coming or going
Personally
at the
approve
Defense
it.
Department, especially at that level, would ultimately be a decision
So
made by
that's a
me,
yes.
and I
Did
stand
you personally
behind that.
relieve him?
Excuse
Did
me?
you personally relieve him? Yes or
Anyone
no?
at that level
You did,
who is
so that's a
relieved
yes.
would be relieved by the Secretary of Defense.
Was there a specific justification for General Hawk's dismissal? Was there a specific justification for General Hawk's dismissal?
Ma'am, we all serve at the pleasure of the president, and the president deserves the
Is
type
it
of
true?
commanders and advisors that he thinks will best
Did you
equip him
discuss General
to
Hawk's
accomplish the
dismissal with
mission.
Laura Loomer prior to his removal?
I don't discuss who I talk about anything with, but ultimately this is my decision, and he serves at the pleasure of the president, and that's why he's no longer there.
So he didn't deny that. He just said, I don't discuss with anyone who I talk to about these decisions.
So do you believe it's appropriate for any social media personality to influence personnel decisions in your department, yes or no?
I believe your time is up, Senator.
Oh. What a way to get out of answering that.
Or no?
I believe your time is up, Senator.
Oh, it is not up to you to tell me when my time is up.
Well, the time
And I
of
am
the
going to say,
senator.
Mr. Secretary, you're either feckless or complicit. You're not in control of your department. You're unserious. It is shocking. You're not combating anti-Semitism within your ranks. It's a dangerous and pivotal time in our nation's history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. And I don't appreciate the smirk, sir. You are the Secretary of Defense.
The time of the gentlelady has expired.
Ouch. Ouch. And in fact, let's find that one I was just referencing. So here it is. This is Mikey Sherrill just going to town on him.
Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kane, thank you both for being here today. Mr. Secretary, your testimony over the last several days before Congress, I've heard you speak about all of your supposed accomplishments from your time at the Pentagon. I have to say, your training at Fox News has let you spend months of dangerous dysfunction and incompetence into catchy phrases like restoring the warrior ethos and increasing lethality. But the truth is, it's really been chaos at the Pentagon under your leadership. You've clearly shown you're unable to manage the Department of Defense, but what I'm most concerned about are 3 specific areas: your operational incompetence, your managerial incompetence, and your budgetary incompetence. So let's start with operational. According to news reports, in your first week on the job, you got confused in a National Security Council meeting and thought President Trump wanted you to stop all aid to Ukraine. In a well-functioning administration, you would have asked for clarification before making that seismic policy shift, but instead you ordered vital military aid heading to the front lines turned around, costing the U.S. millions of dollars and depriving Ukrainian soldiers of equipment they needed to fight Russia. So, Mr. Secretary, can you explain how exactly you misunderstood such a monumental presidential order?
One of many fake news headlines we've dealt with.
So President Trump told you to halt military aid to Ukraine on January 30th?
As is often the case, highly ideological and very ill-informed reporters love to speculate about things they know nothing about.
Yes or no question. Were you ordered by Donald Trump to halt aid to Ukraine?
In order to spear President Trump and myself.
So it sounds like actually the reporting is correct, because I will say, if it wasn't a mistake, why did aid restart only a few days later?
Again, we would take complete issue with what would some call reporting and others call a hatchet job.
So why did aid start just a couple days later?
I'm saying the reporting is inaccurate, ma'am.
I don't think that's correct. So let's move on to your managerial incompetence. I think we can see why you misunderstood the president, because you're obviously misunderstanding my questions.
Ouch. I mean, that hurts, but absolutely right. He can't answer the questions, and this is what happens over and over. We'll just do one more from Mikey Sherrill.
Less than a month into the job, you fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, CQ Brown, and the chief of naval operations, Lisa Franchetti, without cause. And to this day, you still have not provided an adequate explanation for removing them. As far as I can tell, you fired CQ Brown because he was black and Lisa Franchetti because she is a woman. So nearly 4 months later, we still don't have a new nominee for Chief of Naval Operations. News reports, and you can contest it, but I'd love to hear your answer, say that you haven't nominated someone because qualified admirals keep turning the position down. So tell me, Mr. Secretary, when will Congress receive your nomination for the next chairman of the next chief of naval operations?
Ma'am, with all due respect, I would suggest not believing every headline you read.
With all due respect, I'd like your nomination. When will we see it?
There has not a single admiral or any military official has turned down a position that's been
So when will we see
provided.
your nominee for the chief of naval operations?
In due time, for all the right reasons.
Again, I think we've seen the managerial incompetence.
Ouch, again. And of course, he's trying to spin that and deny that anyone has turned down those jobs. But it seems to be rather bizarre that you've sacked all these people and then not replaced them, or many of them, yet. Right. Now we're going on to Senator Kaine here.
Civil War. Why did you decide that these 4 patriots were not worthy enough to have their names on a base?
Back to the base naming.
Well, Senator, as you know, this was never about the names of the bases they were renamed to.
So
This
you
is
so
about
you don't so you don't
restoring
challenge the
all
worthiness.
bases,
You don't-
restoring all
okay.
bases to their original
To the
name, because
Confederate
we're not
names.
about erasing
Okay,
history.
you wanted to. You don't care about their military record. You wanted to restore the Confederate names. When you called the Gregg family to tell them that their dad's name was no longer going to be on the base, what was their reaction?
Senator, the Army notified them of that.
You didn't call any of the families, and I've spoken with the families, and the families were called by the press. That's how they learned about this. They learned about it from the press. You didn't call the Barfoot family, the Gregg family, and you didn't call the Adams family. I told the families I'd ask you about this today. In fact, 2 of General Gregg's granddaughters, Avery and Sydney, are right here in the audience, and I want to ask you this as I close. While you announced that these brave men and women's names would be stripped from the Virginia bases, no orders to that effect have been received by the base commanders. In light of the patriotic service of Van Barfoot, Arthur Gregg, Charity Adams, and Mary Walker, I'd like to ask you simply not to issue the orders changing the names of these Virginia bases. These families, my Commonwealth, are very proud of these heroes, very satisfied with these names, and ask you not to change them. Will you honor these exemplary patriots and keep their worthy names in places on the bases they loved and where they served?
Well, Senator, we very much thank and appreciate them for their service, and we'll find ways to recognize them, but the orders will soon be going to those bases to change the names back to the original name that never should have been changed.
But you have the power to not send those orders. They haven't gone out yet, correct?
Thank you. Senator, your time has expired.
And there you go. Another tough time for Hegseth there. Then we have Senator Reid, again, giving Hegseth a hard time. This one's slightly shorter.
Granting it. Finally, you have pledged to be transparent as Secretary of Defense. Yet, to date, you have not held a single press conference at the Pentagon. Instead, you have evicted news outlets from the building, overwhelmingly restricted press access, and search for leaks within your own staff, even threatening general officers with polygraph tests. This is not transparency, and it is a disservice to the American people who deserve to know what their military is doing.
And there's an interesting point there about, and a very important point about how the Pentagon is interacting with news agencies, and it's just the same with Caroline Leavitt in the White House as the White House press secretary, changing the seats for these different news organizations, putting in right-wing influencer seats the side there. This happened at the Pentagon even earlier, where they got rid of the permanent seats and offices of a number of established news organizations and replaced them with sort of Breitbart, the Daily Caller, that kind of thing. And then it was, I think that is the opposite of being transparent, where you are putting in to the building news organizations that are never going to challenge you in a way that those established media outlets are. Anyway, then we've got the claim here that there is gobbledygook, gibberish, balderdash and poppycock, mumbo jumbo, and the rest. Pete Hegseth is great at this. Let's listen to another excerpt.
No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history.
So this is renaming of the bases again. So
I don't understand what the motivation is to rename bases for people who took up arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is...
I have to agree with this, and I said this earlier. Like, this is a no-brainer for me. There is no argument here. Just, you change the name. Otherwise, you are glorifying people like the worst people in your history. You know, these were people that were standing up for slavery. And of course, you know, if you're someone from the South, particularly maybe who still has those kind of tendencies, then you're going to be in favor of this. And is there an element of appeasing those kind of people? I don't know. It's just, it seems so obvious. Yeah, take the names off. It's quite easy. It's just the name of a base. Take the names off. Let's not glorify pro-slavery generals, and let's just move forward. And then in 15 years, we would have forgotten about it, and all these new names would be completely normalized.
Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this?
Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy, there's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do, all the time, before and later. And we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. No one's disputing that. I would never dispute that. What we're looking at is erasing history, erasing names, erasing base names that service members are tied to. Talk to people that serve at Bragg. Ask people that serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning if they like the fact that the names have been returned. And to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg.
Which is what Tammy Duckworth said earlier. Is like, I was one of those people, and that doesn't apply to me.
So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army, and those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was instead of trying to play this game of erasing names.
We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War.
And I think that was really well stated there. And then we just got one more here. And this isn't from the congressional hearing, but this does concern Hegseth, and it concerns the relationship he has with Donald Trump and the absolute spanking apparently he got due to the parade, the disaster that was the 250th birthday parade that really was, let's face it, the de facto Trump's birthday celebrations. Now, Trump wanted, according to Michael Wolff, a sort of biographer and author, Trump wanted a very serious military parade, rather like North Korea or China or Russia. where people are marching in lockstep and they are very serious, and there's a huge, well choreographed sea of people conforming, and huge numbers of vehicles. And what he got was the real poor cousin of that. But some of these soldiers seem to be, some of them, the drivers in the tank there, or people poking out hatches in the tanks and whatnot, they're waving at people and they're having a nice time, and there's a kind of celebratory atmosphere because it's the birthday of the armed forces. That's what it would be. I think if we held something like that in the UK, we would have elements of waving at the side, and that's quite something that we'd do, certainly, but that's not what Trump wanted. And here Michael Wolff talks about that.
He's kind of pissed off. I mean, he's pissed off at the soldiers. I mean, he's accusing them of hamming it up. And by that he seems to mean that they were having a good time, that they were waving, that they were enjoying themselves and showing a convivial face rather than a military face.
Interesting.
And he kind of reamed out Hegseth for this. Apparently there was a phone call, and he said to Hegseth, the tone was all wrong. Why was the tone wrong? Who staged this? There was the tone problem. Trump, he keeps repeating himself. So that was the word on that phone call, was tone. I would interpret that he wanted something menacing, I suppose, something military, like something like, this is the most staggering force in the world, and maybe it will come for you. Instead of, I think it appeared to a lot of people that there was a kind of festive air. Everybody was actually celebrating something, the 250 years of the U.S. military, probably celebrating that more than Donald Trump's birthday.
Wow, so it looks like even Donald Trump's not happy with Pete Hegseth. So there's a selection of some pretty harsh words from Democratic lawmakers to Pete Hegseth. And I think he, as I've said many times, he's deeply unqualified for the job he's doing. But he is no doubt going to continue to do it. Although there were rumours that his head could be on the chopping block next, that actually Trump was thinking about this around Signalgate. Mike Waltz, as the national security advisor, was the one to go there. But Pete Hegseth isn't too far behind him. So he probably has to watch himself, Pete Hegseth, at the moment. He's incurring the wrath of the Democrats. That's always going to happen, particularly at this very divisive time. But if Trump's not overly happy with him, that was Trump's little baby, that parade. He finally got what he wanted, and it was an unmitigated disaster. There's no doubt about that. Trump knows that. His people know that around him. And now one would assume Pete Hegseth very much knows that. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let me know what you think about these interrogations and what you think is achieved by them, if anything. And I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.